Welcome to week 3 for Internet University. The project for the next 2 weeks deals with building a Twitter clone. For this week, part 1, we're going to build a simple Twitter client that supports viewing a Twitter timeline. So if you scroll down here, you can see a screenshot of what an app might look like with the required user stories complete. And going down further, you can see if you do optionals, you can get the app to look quite polished and very similar to Twitter. So looking at a walkthrough, we're going to authorize with the Twitter API, fetch all of the tweets, and you can see this walkthrough has done a lot of the optionals. And next week, we'll actually add on to this, and we'll be able to compose a new tweet as well. So going over the required stories for this week, the user can sign into Twitter using OAuth login, and we'll talk about what that means. A user can view tweets from their home timeline. And what that means is for each tweet, we want to show the relevant information, which includes the tweet body along with the author's username and name. And finally, the user can refresh the tweet's timeline by pulling down to refresh. This is a very common paradigm in mobile apps to get more recent content. And so we'll look at this guide to figure out how to implement pull to refresh. And the cool thing about Twitter is that there's a ton of really great stretch stories that you could do. For example, adding more tweets on to the end of the timeline so you have infinite pagination. You can do a lot of different things with the styling to make the app feel more Twitter branded. And you can do cool things like persisting tweets offline. So going back to talking about OAuth, one of the differences between the Twitter assignment this week and what we built with the Flix movie database assignment is that the content we get back from the API should depend on who's making the request. So my Twitter timeline is different from your Twitter timeline. In the Flix API, no matter who was using the app, the content we got back was always the same. It was always showing the now playing movies. In this assignment, we actually want the content to change based on who's signed in. And so OAuth is a way that we can allow the user to sign in. It's a way of securely passing credentials between your client, your application, and Twitter. So you don't have to worry too much about the details of OAuth because we're going to be actually using a starter project, which will take care of a lot of the complexity for us. But OAuth is basically the mechanism through which we're able to get content from the API for a particular user. So the first thing we want to do is actually create a new application on the Twitter developer website. So go to developer.twitter.com. And my account is already a developer account. There's a good chance that your account won't be a developer account. And so I've logged in here as a user who is not a developer. And so what you'll see if you go to developer.twitter.com is that you'll have this option to apply. And what you want to do is apply for developer access and then just indicate that you're a student. And then you need to fill out the required fields. So for example, you might need to add in a phone number, explain that you're a student, and so on. So in our case, we have already gotten developer access. So let's create a brand new app, go into apps. And then you can see I have a bunch of apps already. I'm going to create a new one. And we'll call this Rahul Codepath 2019. And then I have some details already filled in over here that I can copy and paste from. So for description, let's just describe that this is a student project to show a list of tweets. The website URL, codepath.org, and then make sure you check this box to enable sign-in with Twitter. And then callback URLs, we're going to say intent : / and this is what will allow us to open up our application once we've done the Twitter authentication. You can leave a bunch of these blank and then tell us how this app will be used. I wrote a quick sentence here about, this is a project for learning and this is through Codepath, which is an awesome nonprofit organization. So now you can tap on create, accept the terms and agreements, and now you can see that our application has been created. So one thing you want to do is go into permissions and check that your access permissions include read and write. And then go into keys and tokens. And we should record the API key and API secret key. So copy that and paste it into your notepad. along with the secret key. And now we can go and read a bit more about the actual API and the documentation. So go into the documentation and open up tweets. And the one that we care about is get tweet timelines. In particular, we want to get the home timeline. So open up the API endpoint. And here's the resource URL. Let's break this down. So the base URL is api.twitter.com/1.1. So 1.1 presumably is the version of the Twitter API. And the endpoint that we care about is statuses/hometimeline.json. This is a GET request on status's home timeline, which basically means at this point, we're only doing a read-only version of the app, which is why it's a GET request. So you can read a bit more about this endpoint here. The response format is JSON. Like we talked about, JSON means JavaScript object notation, which is a very common way to transmit information between different APIs. It does require authentication, which is why we're using OAuth. And then rate limited, yes. So what rate limiting means is that Twitter wants to ensure that their servers and their backend is not being overloaded by too many requests from a single client or a single application. And so they're going to limit the number of requests you're allowed to do in a certain time window. So you can see here that you can only do 15 requests in a 15-minute time window, which is actually not that high. So if you do run into this, which you might, then what you should do is go grab some coffee, grab some water, and then come back after 15 minutes, and you should be able to make requests on the Twitter API again. So let's read a bit about the parameters that are relevant for this endpoint. First is count, which is self-explanatory, the number of tweets or records to retrieve. By default, this is 20. Since ID is a parameter which returns results with an ID greater than, that is, more recent than the specified ID. So, for example, when we implement pull to refresh, we'll want to specify a since ID so that we only get tweets that are more recent than what we specify here. And you can read more about a bunch of other parameters here that we won't touch. So here you can see a sample or response for what one tweet object in JSON format might look like. So you can see here's when the tweet was created. Here's the body of the tweet, which we'll be interested in. And you can also see that there's a user, the author of that tweet. And so for the author, we'll care about the name of that user, the screen name, otherwise known as the handle of that user, along with their profile image, which you can see here. And so we'll want to parse this JSON in our application so we can actually render this in our list of tweets.